I remember being a latchkey kid myself. As I compared my experience with the experience of the children that I saw, for me, I had lots of support from different people in my life to get through that time. It really was clear that there was a great need for some kind of further activities. We were just really blessed by a lot of different people who were interested in trying to do what they could to help with this mission. The ministry of trying to develop some activities for children. One of the things that I think of often is how for First Mennonite Church, the Lighthouse Ministries is a continuing the tradition of outreach to young people. Since the turn of the last century, First Mennonite has had this outreach to children in the neighborhood and in the area. And so I often thought about it felt good to be a part of that long tradition. One example that has to do with the origins of the contemporary Lighthouse mission was people named Willis and Alice Summers that were part of First Mennonite congregation when we moved here in 1985. Willis, and with a lot of help, was instrumental in building a teen center exactly 30 years before Lighthouse Ministries started. It was just an example of how First Mennonite and the people of First Mennonite continued to work with children. And Willis and Alice continued to be supportive and were great supporters of Lighthouse Ministries when it got started back in 1996.
When we first moved here, maybe 2 years after we first moved here, even maybe before that, we started, I think, with a girls' club, and then it evolved into a venture club, what actually was called Venture Club, and this we used curriculum that we got a hold of through the Mennonite Church, so it was for clubs. So it started just with volunteers from the church. We would just gather people every other week usually, and in those days we would take flyers and show up at the school and greet kids as they were coming out, or we'd walk around the neighborhood and invite people, and then friends would invite people, and we would sometimes only have 4 to 5 volunteers for those 40 kids. And I'm not sure how we did that. That seems impossible today, but yeah, somehow we pulled it off. One of the things that we had to do with 40 kids and a small church like this was to make use of every available space that we had, and that was the days before the nice building over here. So we would use the outside as much as possible, which meant we were using the cemetery. And since we lived next to the cemetery, we didn't think that was any big deal. But some of the kids were like, "You mean we're going to have a bonfire in the cemetery tonight?" Another favorite was called Apple Night, in which everything had to have an apple in it. And our apple pancakes became famous. And I can still see Murray Mask there flipping those pancakes. And I think the kids could smell it down the street, because whenever we had Apple Night, people were very happy to come and have those pancakes. A couple other things that I mentioned that I think are still carried on to this day are the carnivals. We started with the summer carnival, doing that. And when we got dibs on renting an old wooden dunking machine, that quickly became the highlight of the carnival, okay? And that got carried on for many years and is still a fun time in the summer for people. The other thing that I think we wanted to just block out maybe were the YMCA swimming nights, okay? And this is when I don't know how we got by with it, but we'd load kids in vans and our cars and take them just downtown to the Y, and those nights we might have 50 kids, okay? And so we had a wonderful time, but we were always just a little nervous about how everything was going to go, but that was certainly a highlight.
Well, I wanted to mention our activity court, our concrete basketball court / parking lot / whatever we wanted to use it for. It was a miracle in its origins. back in 1995, a group of people, Arlen Overholt and Tom Erb and Keith Yoder especially, were people who got together and planned out how to actually do the concrete pouring. And that was, of course, a big day when that day happened. I was hanging around there trying to be helpful, probably don't know how much help I was. And we were standing around, and you've got wet concrete and you got this urge to write something. What are we going to write to memorialize this great event? We couldn't put all the names of all the people in because it would just cover up the whole basketball court. So we thought a little bit more, and finally we landed on the phrase "live the dream," because it captures some of the themes of the purpose that we were envisioning for Lighthouse Ministries. Of course, reference to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. With his dream speech, and the dream of children getting along together of all different backgrounds is significant in that, as well as the dream of providing an opportunity to live out the kingdom of God in this particular neighborhood, in this particular spot, and following the teachings of Jesus was back of that phrase. And so if you come and visit and look along the edge of the court, you can still see the words there, "Live the dream." Again, the origins of Lighthouse Ministries is a tribute to the cooperation of many different people. And especially at the beginning, we had so much encouragement from other Mennonite churches, from the Ohio Mennonite Conference, from the Oak Grove Endowment Fund, Mennonite Mutual Aid Grant. It seemed like right at first the project was fundraising and building things, which was a lot of fun, but we had a lot of help. Oh, and I also want to mention Howard Ray Miller Jr. from HRM, who was so helpful in the building phase. And then another important part of the beginnings, let's say like a year after the start, 1996 was the start. 97 was when we hired John Mathewson for the Lighthouse programming. Wendy was a staff person as well that helped us, and the Lighthouse committee that was meeting and putting together this vision included, of course, myself and Darren and Julie, but also Jonas Koblenz and Lauren Byler, Maynard Hirschberger, and Nelson Burkholder were people who were willing to meet together and put the ideas into real flesh.